So welcome everybody. It is February 21st. This is the first session of the 2018 IMDHA presenter, IACT IMDHA presenter series in anticipation of the Hypno Expo 2018, which is coming to Daytona Beach on the 18th through the 20th of May, with pre and post conference programs on the days immediately before and after that weekend. And over the course of the next 8 weeks, we will be interviewing presenters that will be offering pre and post conference programs at the conference. So it's great to be here. Hi, Karen.
Hello, Michael. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Always good to see you. This is my my cohort here, who I could not begin to do any of this stuff without. So I'm so glad to have you.
I appreciate that, but I'm not sure that's true.
I'll tell you what, it really makes life a whole lot easier for me just to know that there's somebody out there that's got my back. So
I'd have that.
So we love you for that. So before we begin, I just have a couple announcements to make, just to let you know about the software. Right now, I hope that most of you are seeing my face as I'm talking to you. And if you are, it means that you are in active speaker mode. Just stay there. And what you will see is the person who is speaking when they're speaking. So when it's George's time to talk with us, when it's Karen's time to talk with us, that's who you will see on the screen. It makes it a whole lot simpler. Let's see, if you, down at the bottom of your screen, you may have the option to open up a chat room and to open up a participants list. You can feel free to use either of those. The chat room may come in handy when it's time for questions and answers, because sometimes it's a way for you to let us know that I have a question or something, and without having to stop the speaker, we can, hold that for a minute and then, refer to you and your question later on. So feel free to use the chat box anytime you want to, and we'll do our best to keep track of it. Sometimes it really flies by, so please don't write me a thesis about about anything, because I won't be able to read it and do this at the same time. The other thing I want you to know is that, as I said, this program is being recorded, and this recording will be posted hopefully by tomorrow afternoon, by Friday at the absolute latest. We'll post it on the IACT IMDHA forum. For those of you who are members, you can log into the forum and find it there. But also at the IACT and IMDHA website, just at the regular website, at the top of the page, there's a drop-down menu that says Media. And if you click on there, you'll find that all of the presenter series lectures, or talks rather, are being recorded and posted there as well, so the general public can get access to them. And I think, what the heck, Karen, because this is the virtual chapter operating or sponsoring, or however we want to say this, operating this program, we will also post them on the Facebook group under virtual chapter. So if you're a member of the virtual chapter, you can find them there. If you're not, we would encourage you to join. The virtual chapter is a chapter of IACT and IMDHA. We meet once a month on the second Tuesday night of every month, the same time that you're meeting right now. And in fact, it's the same login that you're using right now, but once a month. And because Karen and I are world travelers and seem to know everybody on the planet, we have the great good fortune, unlike most chapters, to be able to get wonderful guest speakers from all over everywhere. So we're going to have a really good one this next month coming up, and we'll tell you about it when it gets closer to time for that. But if you join Virtual Chapter, a group on Facebook, you'll get the announcements of all the chapter meetings, and you'll also get the replays of these meetings and the replays of our chapter meetings as well. So look for that group, Virtual Chapter, and become a member, and we'll see you around there. So that's a lot of stuff. I'm out of air. How are you doing?
Let me just add one thing. If you watch these, of course you are watching tonight, these or the virtual chapter meetings or the replays, you can always get CEUs from IACT and IMDHA for watching.
Yeah, and the way that you get your cues is just to log into the IACT or IMDHA website, whichever one you are a member of, and the membership information will pop up, and there's a place for you to just say, I spent a couple of hours with Michael and Karen and their guest, and I really want to get credit for that. So let them know that you attended the virtual chapter or you attended the presenter series, and this presenter series tonight is worth an hour and a half for you. We're going to start with George, and then we will be introducing at about 9:15 or so Roy Hunter to do the second half of the program tonight, and he'll be joining us a little later on. So with all that in mind, I think I need to tell you about George Bien, if you don't already know about this fella. I have interviewed him for the last 4 years at least, I think. At
least.
Yeah, and so I've got the questions all memorized. And I will tell you that he is the world's first recipient of the National Guild of Hypnotists President's Award. He is the world's first recipient of the Rexford L. North Memorial Trophy, which is the Oscar of hypnosis. And he is the world's first recipient of the Charles Tebbets Award. He is also a recipient of the IACT President's Award, the IACT Distinguished Service Award, and the only person twice honored with IACT's Educator of the Year. So he's former principal trainer for the National Guild of Hypnotists and the American Board of Hypnotherapy, and is now the principal trainer for the International Association of Counselors and Therapists. George created and conducts the IACT Master Trainer Certification Program, which is one of the things we're going to be talking to him about tonight. The board certified hypnotist program and the certified stress management consultant training. And George was inducted into the International Hypnosis Hall of Fame in 1989. So with all that, oh my gosh, George, we are so happy to have you with us. And you always get to lead off this series. So welcome as our first guest of the year.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for your kindness. And I'll tell you, hearing all that just makes me feel old. But I definitely had quite a tenure with a number of organizations. And I don't know if we're going to go into that today, but it's quite a story.
Yeah, a much longer program for that. But we've had that discussion, and it's always delightful. I'll tell you, typically we ask people, and every time we've done these hypnosis interviews, we've asked people something like, how did you get involved with hypnosis? And, and that's the usual stuff. But George, you are the trainer's trainer. So although I'm interested in how you got involved in hypnosis, what I'm even more interested in is, how did you end up getting involved in the business of training?
Well, let's put it this way. I made a decision, and the decision was this. After going to a number of trainings, I felt that a lot of trainers, practically all the trainers who I went with, held something back. And I promised myself that I would never hold anything back. In other words, if there was something I knew that I felt should be shared, I would share it. And I didn't try to compete because, and I don't want to mention names, but I went with some, they were marvelous hypnotherapists, icons in the field, but at the same time, they would hold certain things back. Mm-hmm. And I just promised I felt that. And I said I would never do that. Once I got to know the people, they didn't hold anything back because it was more of a friendship. Mm-hmm. But while they were doing the training, they did. And I said, I never want to do that. And that's one of the things that really inspired me to go into the trainings also. Because I said, I'm just going to just tell the truth. Mm-hmm. And if I suck at something, I will tell them.
How long have you been training, George?
How long what?
Have you been a trainer?
Oh my gosh. Since the 1980s. And I was with what's the name of that organization? I can't think of the name of the organization. National Guild of something. No, I'm kidding. National Guild of Hypnotists. And what was interesting is my first teacher was the teacher for the National Guild. And it was a very basic course. All we would basically do is we look at a spiral, and then we'd have a certain script, and we do that. His name was Stephen Lavelle. And I owe a lot to Stephen because Stephen actually helped me break into the business. And so he was in New York. I was a musician, and I was teaching guitar and then doing gigs, as they called them at that time. I was doing Broadway shows in the orchestra pit, working with a lot of stars, Shirley Bassey, Ronan Martin, Sid Caesar, Nancy Wilson, The Fifth Dimension. I mean, just on and on. And doing the Vegas thing, the Tahoe and Reno. I loved it. However, when the light would shine upon me, I would really tense up, and I had to do something about it. I mean, I was professional enough to get over that a bit, but still, I didn't have full control over it. That's what got me to hypnosis. So when Stephen Lavelle was coming into New York and doing all these seminars I saw advertised, I would go and see them. And I took maybe 6, 7, 8 of them with Stephen. And what happened is that's when I learned about Gil Boyne, and John Kappas, another one of my teachers, he had programs of theirs that he would sell. So I saw these programs from the Hypnosis Motivation Institute. I said, wow, let me buy the whole set. And I would buy everything he had, literally. And then I eventually, like I said, I did study at HMI shortly, but I studied their whole, what do you call it, home study program.
Mm-hmm.
And I studied with John Kappas also. And Gil Boyne, that changed everything for me. I bought some of his videos, and I've never seen anything like that in hypnosis. And so I went to study with Gil Boyne. And it was intense, to say the least, intense. He would be throwing people out of the classroom. And at one point, somebody asked him, Mr. Boyne, are you ever going to teach us how to do an induction? And he said, an induction? That's just a ritual. Teach yourself. And he left the room.
Wow.
Well, I knew some inductions because I watched his videos and this and that, and I started teaching them in class. He comes back and he sees this. And he looks at me, he goes, you! I said, oh my gosh, you're going to throw me out of the class. I said, yes. He said, you have the hypnotism fever. I said, is that okay? He said, it's good. And I mean, over the years, we became really, really good friends. But he was my main mentor, if you want to say that. And we just became, he was in New York a number of times, and we'd hang out. And what was beautiful is we go to lunch and things like that. He said, I love when we get together because we don't talk about this client or look what I did here or that. It was just a social thing, and it was absolutely wonderful. And I miss him greatly. But that's how I got into it, mainly because my fear of performance. I had to do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Lovely.
I mean,
A fear of performance? You?
Yes, absolutely. To get on stage, that was not in the cards for me. Not in the cards. Not in the cards. And hypnosis is what changed everything. See, if I was in the pit, I wouldn't really be noticed that much. But if the light would shine on me, that's when I would get concerned. And I mean, like I said, I loved it. I loved doing Broadway shows and working with, like I said, Shirley Bassey, or I mean, just all these wonderful, major stars. And they were all so down to earth. One of the sweetest people I ever worked with was Dawn Wells. And Dawn Wells is Mary Ann from Gilligan's Island.
Yeah.
One of the sweetest people. And she did a show, they're playing our song, and she was the principal. And I said to her, I said, you know, I had a crush on you for years. And I was at the Fritos and cream chips at that time. And that evening, in my hotel room, there's a knock on my door. I open the little peephole. I say, Dawn Wells. I said, thank you, God, thank you. Well, it wasn't that. She said, George, I've got a gift for you. And she bought me a bag of Fritos and cream cheese. I mean, who does that? And this is a major star, you know, and it was wonderful. And I mean, working with Bob Hope, and he's so down to earth and so real. It was wonderful.
Yeah.
But like I said, eventually what happened is I left that. I went into hypnosis full time.
Yeah, great.
How did you get over that fear? I know you said hypnosis, but can you be more specific about that, George?
Well, let's put it this way. It didn't happen overnight. I worked on myself. I didn't really go to somebody because it just, for some reason, I just felt I could do it. And I'm that kind of person, I don't know if it's good, but I usually feel I could do it myself. And I know we need other people, of course we do. And sometimes I give in. I should give in. But I put a lot of pressure on myself. And I just knew I had to do something about it. And so I was studying and I was working. 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 And again, being around Stephen Lavelle, this was, you look at the spiral, and do I have one here? Yeah, one of these things.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
You know, you do it and it starts turning around and all it is. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I still have the one I bought from Stephen Lavelle. And what happened is Stephen eventually asked me to teach with him. But what I was doing each time is working on myself, reading the books, taking the scripts, rewriting the scripts for myself, saying to myself, recording them, listening to them. I mean, it was intense. But at one point, there was a breakthrough. I just, all of a sudden, there was a shift. I felt different. I felt like I was somebody else. Mm-hmm. And I said, wait a second, you're not somebody else. You're still you. You're just a new you. Yeah. And that did it. And I just never went back. And because of Stephen, I got the opportunity to be the National Guild of the principal trainer for the National Guild of Hypnotists.
Nice.
Because what happened is they started giving me a lot of the seminars. And those were the days of the hypnosis seminars. We had 100 people in this room, 150 people in another room, I mean, all of this stuff. And they were asking me to do it. It was Dwight Damon and Elsom Eldridge. And Elsom Eldridge was like the marketer. And I mean, they ripped me off. It was 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. It should have been 50, 50, 50, but I didn't know that. But I didn't care. I didn't care because I was learning. And I'll tell you, some of the situations that I was there, I mean, one situation where the people missed the first day because I thought it was the second day. And they come in and they're not happy, these psychologists. And you learn how to, in other words, how to tame them down, how to help them relax. And they love the training. And we had no complaints from them. I mean, things like that. I've learned so much from the trainings, so much.
Well, and one of the things that I think is interesting to consider after this, so you had this fear of public speaking to begin with.
Yeah.
Now, I'm always interested in not only the how do people overcome them, but what the experience of being past that's like. See, for example, now, what happens if you mess up? How do you respond to that?
I'm a human being. I mess up, and I get a kick out of it. I might say something stupid. And if I say something stupid, I said, you know what? You didn't hear that, did you? You did? Well, so what? I said, can somebody repeat what I said? Good. I want to hear what it sounded like by hearing it rather than saying it. And I just make a joke out of it.
Sure. And before you did the hypnosis, if you'd messed up in front of a people public speaking, what would have happened to you?
I would suffer, literally suffer. And it would be very difficult for me to get my composure back. I had to because I was working as a professional. Yeah. I mean, there's no excuses. Yeah. So they expect something. They pay you and they expect something from you.
From nights to day.
Yeah. But now I just try to I do my best to make a joke out of it.
Mm-hmm. So, by the way, people who, if you don't mind me just pushing ahead, people who take trainings from you often talk about your sense of humor. I don't quite understand it myself, but I'm teasing you, of course. But they talk about your sense of humor. Were you always funny? Were you always a joke teller? Is that
not when I was concerned about how people would interpret what I would say or how they felt about me when I was speaking with them. But when I finally let that go, I mean, I don't want people to hate me. Of course, I want them to like me. I want them to get some benefit. But when I got over that, it didn't matter. Mm-hmm. I just turned it into a joke. Like I can't. In other words, I can't believe you laughed at that. Oh, that's right, you didn't.
That's right, you didn't. And then they laughed at that. That's correct.
That's what I use a lot. In other words, I mean, they don't laugh. I say something stupid. I say, I can't believe you laughed at that. They said, oh, that's right, you didn't. And I just move on. The idea is a body in motion has to stay in motion unless acted upon by another force. The thing is to maintain the momentum. Yeah. And you've got to let it go. I learned that from my wife really well. Elena, she was an absolute, I mean, she's a blessing. She's a true blessing. And she can let something go and move on. I would hold on to it and punish myself. And she helped me learn. She taught me to be able to let things go and move on. You do something right now, you can't change it. You do your best to rectify it, but that's all you could do. And then you have to move on.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, it's been such a wonderful, wonderful journey. Such a wonderful. I can't even. When I think back, I have to just smile.
Sure.
You know. But Linda puts me to work. Linda Otto. All these years, I just do the trainer. Now she has me doing a lecture too.
Yeah, that's slave driver.
But she asked me. She said, and this goes in keeping with the questions you were asking. She said, what would be a good lecture for you to do? I said, if I have to do it? She said, yes. I said, how about from novice to pro in record time? Yeah. And she loved the title. Yeah. And basically, there's this guy who went from being unknown in the field of hypnosis to becoming the main trainer for 3 of the major organizations. How did that happen? How did I overcome the fear?
Yeah. By the way, I'm glad you mentioned Linda because it occurs to me that I hadn't said this. Robert and Linda are not with us tonight. Typically, they do come in on these calls. They are just off celebrating finally on a cruise their 45th anniversary, almost a year late. So
almost a year late.
So we wish them well, and they'll be joining us in future calls. So she wanted me to say hello to everybody, and especially to you, George, and thank you for being here.
And you know what? They called me today. Just to wish me. I mean, that's how sweet they are. I mean, and they said, "Listen, George, have a great whatever interview," and just wonderful. They were driving, And it was wonderful. I know them for years and years and years and years. And it's amazing how Bob and I connected, because many years ago we did a seminar together. And those of you who know Robert, he's intense on stage. So when he goes into his thing, there's nothing else that matters. Boom, 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 boom. So what do I have to do? I have to build up again until I can do my thing. Then what does he do? It's not competition, but he just gets more intense. So I have to get more intense. And I'll never forget this. This was in New York City. At one point, we're on the stage together. I looked at Robert. I said, Robert, I think we scared the heck out of them. The people were like this.
Well, speaking of scaring people, is there anything like scaring people or something like that that would hold somebody back from being a good trainer?
You know, not at all. And I'll tell you why. Because if you can do that, you can always do less. See, it's usually harder to do more. If I can get intense, I can definitely get mellow. So,
right.
And to do it instantly, and that's the thing, and not just do it and pretend it, but be it. See, that's the thing with being a trainer. You have to be an actor. And when I say an actor believes the role they're playing. That's who they are. So when you're up on stage, that's who you are. You're not the person who goes home and then puts his feet on the couch with his dirty socks, where his wife says, honey, can you please take your feet off the couch with those dirty socks? I'm not going to be that person in front of the room. Yes, honey, I said that.
So do you recommend someone take your training and go out and immediately start training? Or do they have to mull it over?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of material in the training, a great deal of material. I would hope that they would at least go over it a few times or record it or something. Well, they get the things also on audio too, the workbooks. So just listen to it a few times. And the one thing that I definitely don't want them to be is me. I want them to be themselves. They can add what they got from me anytime they want to, and I'd be very flattered if they did. But it's about being who they are and bringing out that thing, because they'll do something that I won't be able to do, very possibly. And I would see them and I'd say, gee, I want a piece of that. That's wonderful.
So you're not really handing them a list of steps that they must do in this order, this order, this order. You're saying, take this material, make it your own.
That's exactly what I say. I mean, when I created the workbooks for the Master Trainer course, I made believe I was teaching it. So the actual workbook itself, the student workbook, and of course the trainer's workbook, or by exact words, I was making believe I taught the course, and I wrote it out exactly that way. So they don't have to do that, but it's there for them if they want it. Yeah.
In fact, one of the things that I notice, and I'll point out to people listening, if you are a member of this organization, perhaps by now you have received this other little IMDHA or IACT IMDHA Expo guide here.
That's a nice cover. That's a very nice cover.
Well, it's also a really nice inside of the back page that lists all the incredible amount of stuff that is included in your training, George. It's one of the things that really is unique. You've got DVDs, you've got PowerPoint presentations, you've got on and on. Maybe, in fact, you might even want to mention some of the components that people get when they do your training.
Do you know what? I would have to think about them to mention them.
In fact, so many of them. That's exactly.
It's so many. I mean, the best way I could say it is, it's as though I am teaching the course, and for the people, and it's also an audio, so they have that whole course in audio. And the thing is for them to listen to it as many times as they choose to and take from it what they want. Mm-hmm. I'm not a stickler as far as you have to teach it my way. No. But there is a specific amount in the course material that needs to be taught. And that's the material. This is what the people learn. Yeah. And
I think you're starting to answer my next question already, but Karen asked you just a little while ago if there's anything that would hold a new trainer back. The other side of that question is there a specific kind of person or a personality type or something that wouldn't do well in your trainer's program?
That would not do?
Yeah.
Well, that's the kind of person, it could be a number of reasons, but certainly a kind of person who cannot bend. In other words, there's no bending at all. They cannot. And in other words, you've got to have some flexibility. So a person who's inflexible, it's my way or no way, no highway or a highway, never happened. They would not be good at that.
Yeah.
That is the main thing, I would think. But, I mean, what does it take to be an effective trainer? I mean, you have your own style. Be yourself, true. If you have an accent, as long as people understand you, keep the accent. Leave it alone. Don't try to get rid of it.
Yes.
And the important thing is know how to control the emotions of an audience. What's the old saying? The head never hears until the heart has listened.
Nice.
And that is so true. And know how to deal. If you're nervous, what is nervousness? The definition of nervousness is an excitation of the nervous system. I learned that definition from Gil Boyne. And that is the definition because that's what it is. So if you know that you're going to be nervous, use it. Use that excitation and keep it in your hand.
You know, sometimes, George, you're so close up to a thing that you do well that I think you don't always recognize some of the particular qualities that you have. Certainly, the NLP people discovered that in modeling folks that had no idea about how they did some of the things that they did. And I just heard you say something interesting, and that was about, well, you said several interesting things, but a particularly interesting thing, and that was about controlling the emotions of an audience. And the other side of that, by the way, that I think doesn't even occur to you because you do it so well, is what about controlling your own state, you know, in order to be able to do that? There's some trainers that just lose it halfway through if you know, it doesn't go the way that they want.
It's so true. I mean, well, what would hold a trainer back from being his or her best? I mean, basically, there's a big curse, and that's the curse I had, and that's the curse of perfectionism. It is a curse. It never lets you enjoy any of your successes. Mm-hmm. Yes, you could have done it better. I could have done it better. We could have done it better. But you see, it's so important that people, what they call failures, just to see them as learning opportunities. I didn't see that. I know it's easier said than done, but it's got to be that way. But the kind of person who would not do well, if they're over-analytical, that's one thing.
Yeah.
If they expect me as the teacher, teaching the trainer, they expect me to do it for them. I can't do it for them. If they have major control issues, that's another issue that's bad. A person who says, prove it to me. When I teach the course, I'm not there to prove anything. I'm there to share. A person who's so far familiar, oh, I heard that before. Yeah, that's like this, that's this, and this, and this. Yes, there's some familiarities, but you bring your personal self to them. And that's where the difference comes in.
Sure.
And the most important thing is anyone who believes all these things I said basically don't apply to them. they apply on some level to all of us. I mean, how many times I go to a training that I hear, I say, I've heard that before, and I say these two words to myself. Shut up. And then I say my name, George. Shut up, George.
Those things that you mentioned that would hold someone back from being a great trainer might hold them back from even being a good hypnotist. Wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
You've got to have those things in hypnosis, the flexibility and the maneuverability and being able to, as Michael said, manage emotions, yours and theirs. All of that's necessary to be a good hypnotist.
Well, the word you said there is so important, flexibility, to be able to shift gears in an instant. And it's probably one of the most difficult for people to do because we're so attached to our beliefs. And you know what? You might be learning something right now from this individual. It may be totally opposite of what you believe all these years. Right. So I want to hear the whole thing. I don't want to cut the person off in the middle of it.
So you mentioned Gil Boyne threw people out of trainings. Have you ever thrown anyone out of a training, George?
Say this again, please.
You said Gil Boyne sometimes threw people out of his trainings. Have you ever thrown anyone out?
I threw, on one training, 16 people. I threw out. And there were only 14 there and me. But we went out for lunch when I threw them out. No.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that. No, I threw them out for lunch. No, I've not thrown anybody out. But what I have done is on a break have spoken to people. Like if somebody, this know-it-all type of individual, I mean, I love to get them because usually I can squash them right away, but I don't want to embarrass them. Because if I embarrass this individual, obviously their self-esteem is not very high. If I embarrass them, they'll never forgive me. So on the break, listen, you know this stuff. I mean, this stuff is easy for you, but these people, it's tough for them to get it. I mean, we'll smile at each other. We know it. And then I'll look at that person, I look at them with a smile, and they'll smile back at. And I say to myself, oh, this poor person. But hopefully she will learn something.
That is so good to hear. I can tell you that I have been in trainings with some people who are not flexible like that, or who will try to embarrass people to make a point. And it's not a good training.
They'll never forgive you for that. I mean, it's not right. You're not there to embarrass anybody.
It's not good for the person who's embarrassed or for anybody else in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, what can we do? We have our own style. It may not fit into somebody else's style, that's one. But the most important thing is be yourself. And like I said before, if you have an accent, use it.
Is that the most important tip?
It's one of the more important things, I would say. I mean, another one is to know how to deal with some people call it nervousness, with that excitement. I want that excitement. I want to get up there and I want to be intense, but not start out that way, but build to it. But to be able to shift emotions instantly, to be able to shift gears instantly, to be able to say something and in the middle of the sentence, finish it differently than you planned to because of something that you saw or something that you heard at the moment.
Nice.
You are a musician, aren't you? It sounds like the way music goes too, right?
Well, I imagine. I mean, all those years.
Yeah.
All those years.
Yeah.
You see, what do you call it? Valerie Simpson, who I also work with, Ashford and Simpson. She said something to me. She said, "You flow when you speak." I said, "Is that a good thing?" I don't know. She says, "I like that."
Cool.
And it has to do with the hypnosis.
Cool.
Because before that, never happened. Never happened. I mean, you're up there. I mean, you I don't want you, for lack of a better word, you're the star of the show, so to speak. It's your show. And remember, this is very important. It's your room. That's crucial. When you're up there doing the training, you own that room. It is your room. You can be nice, you can be kind and all of this, but you own the room. It's your room. So you physically project yourself by speaking. Yeah. Be natural, gestures to complement what you're saying. I mean, many trainings, especially in the business world, might be important for the speaker, but end up being so boring for the audiences. And the thing is to have some emotion, intensity, walk around a little bit. Some people stay in one spot. This is my spot. and think tall. I mean, what am I? I mean, my wife is taller than I am. I'm like 5'10", whatever. I mean, it's not really that short, but whatever. If somebody's 5'6", well, oh wait, Napoleon Bonaparte was 5'6", and he's just controlled most of Europe.
Right.
And then it was less than 10 years. Genghis Khan was, I think he was 5'1". 5'1". So I'm sure these people thought tall.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is what you're saying is your enthusiasm. Because enthusiasm is contagious.
Sure.
It really is. Yeah.
How short was Napoleon? I don't know. But you know, George, just curiously, and I've noticed as I've been listening to you tonight, and I'm curious, after this is over, I want to run this back and count. Because I think that I have heard you use the word intense and intensity more times, you know, in the space of the little time we've been talking than I've ever heard before. So you're an intense guy, and something we haven't talked to you about, because you do a lot of things. You know, you're really working. It's not just putting this class out there, but as you mentioned earlier, you've got the board certified hypnotist program and the certified stress management consultant thing that you do as well. Can you just briefly, I know this is primarily about the master training program, but can you just tell us a little bit about those two things as well?
Well, the board certified, we did it a long time ago, and then we stopped doing it. Why, I'm not sure, but just stopped. And we just revitalized it. I just did one here recently, and we had somebody from Germany. We had people from I don't know, a number of countries. It was really, really wonderful. And it's there's a lot more there than just the basic stuff that is taught in the hypnosis training. It's, I mean, gosh, it's I can't even think of anything in particular, but it's a lot of specific things that we do.
Is it a long course?
I'm sorry?
Is it a long course?
It's a 2-day program. Uh-huh. It's a Saturday and Sunday. And basically we just cover so many things. We review a number of things, but then again, we do a lot of things that we didn't do there. And I just love doing the program. And in right now with the stress management also, that one we used to do a while ago, and we started doing it again now. And it's again, I love doing it. I love doing it.
It's so important right now, don't you think?
I'm sorry? Oh, yeah.
So important right now.
Well, stress, it's still the #1 health problem in the United States today. Yeah. And I have that on the ad. It's right there. It's the first thing I have on the ad. And it's so true. But they get so many things with that program. I mean, gosh, what can I think of? Basic theory, of course. They get supervised practice. They have take-home assessments, interactive stress management skills that we go over, creating a powerful stress management seminar, and they have the whole outline of a 3-hour seminar, a 1-day seminar, a 2-day seminar, and all these things. And what's beautiful about it also is they have a number of videos. 2 of the videos actually are from years ago. One I did for the National Guild of Hypnotists and one for the American Board of Hypnotherapy. And this is the 1990s. However, the stuff that I covered was just as relevant now as it was then. In one of the seminars, the one for the National Guild, we had over 250 people in the class. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And they get audios of that also and that kind of thing. But what's really wonderful is they have a presentation. What is it? Make stress an ally, not a debility. And it's a virtual presentation video, no audience. It's me talking to a camera as though I'm talking to an audience. And they have the full PowerPoint for that, and they can watch me as many times as they want. So when they do their let's say, seminars, basically the book sessions or the book trainings or whatever it may be, they just watch that. And it's called Make Stress an Ally, Not a Debility.
Nice.
And I made believe I was teaching a course. So I love the program. It's a great program.
So I'll tell you what I'd really like to hear from you before we get done, because the time is just flying by us here. As a matter of fact, we've really only got a few more minutes left. But here's the thing: you have been training hypnosis instructors and trainers for quite a long time now.
Very, very long.
And I know that you, like me, have seen changes and changes and changes since since we first started doing this stuff. So there's a sense in which the training that you're doing now is to prepare people to be trainers in the future, which is continuing to change. So as you look out ahead into the future of training, what do you see happening?
I didn't hear the last part, Michael. I'm sorry.
As you look out into the future of training, that is what the trainers that you're training today are going to be training in a very different world. Well, changes so fast. So what do you see about the future of training?
The future definitely is more online. I mean, now you can reach so many countries. I mean, all around the world. I mean, and in real time. That's what's amazing about this. Now, it does take somebody personal part away, take somebody humanity away, definitely. But if you know your subject and if you really care, people will still feel your emotions. And that's what, I mean, I see that going exponentially. And I know IACT was a bit concerned initially when we had the boards. First, it was the board certified hypnotherapists. It was about maybe 2 years ago when we first did that. And they were concerned about that at the time. And I said, run it and see what happens. And they ran it and it was good. But then we stopped running it for some reason. And then they wanted, rather than hypnotherapist, board certified hypnotist, which is fine. And there's certain things I can't do, obviously. And there's certain things they can't do. I can't grab their hand and shake hands with them. I can't put my arms around them.
Right.
But I can use a lot of feeling words and inspire them. And as long as you're yourself, because for some people, it's really not easy just to talk to a camera.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm not talking to a camera. I'm talking to you. So likewise, you forget about the camera. That's why sometimes I'm not even looking at that because I see you over here.
Right.
So if I'm not looking at the camera, it's because you're here. And the question is, if you can take your humanity, your humanness, if there's such a word, and be able to express it over the camera. Yeah, you have to be an actor. But the greatest actors are doing something that's reality for them. They are that person at that moment.
Yeah.
And if you are that person, you are feeling what you're teaching. And if people can feel your heart, that's the most important thing for them to feel. And they feel your genuineness, you can do them all online.
Absolutely.
And you said something very important. You said that you did some of your earliest training on DVDs or cassettes or
Yes.
that way.
Yeah.
This is taking that to the next level, and it does give you that back and forth with someone there in real time, no matter where they are. Geography is no longer an obstacle.
Yeah, and very well said, and absolutely true. Absolutely true, Karen. Very, very, very well said. Well said. Yeah, very well articulated.
Thank you.
Yeah. But it's true. Do I hear a sound?
Yeah.
Do I hear a person?
You probably heard me trying to interrupt and say we're really doing a great job here and coming to a conclusion. We're running to the end of your time. I'm wondering, before we move on, we've got just a minute or so left. If there's anybody out there that has a burning question for George, can you let us know about it? You can either just type a little message in the chat window. That is, you can open up chat at the bottom of your screen and just say, I have a question. Or in the participants window, if you've got that open, there's a place at the bottom that lets you raise your hand so we know you've got a question. Or you can just open your microphone and say, I've got a question. Either of those things will work.
And it could be that George covered it so well that.
Well,
Well, that's what I was thinking. When you've got the trainer of master trainers, that makes you a meta master trainer, at least in NLP language. That's a lovely.
well, what can I say? You're a kind man, and that's why I almost always sit next to you when I get the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, it's great to have you on here, George. So thank you so much for being with us tonight, and we'll look forward. Now, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Typically at the end of these calls, when there's only one speaker, we do this, but I think I'm going to try it anyway. It's a little reckless, but what I'm going to do is I am just going to open up everybody's microphone all at once in a second. I'll tell you when I'm going to do it, and in that great cacophony that follows, we can all say thank you, George. Good night, George. We love you, George. Whatever it is that you want to say. Then I'm going to put you all on mute again so that we can move on to the rest of the program. But let's give you a minute to give those greetings to George Bien. Thank you, George, for being here. And everybody, his program, before I let you go, is to remember it is Wednesday through Friday. That is the 16th, 17th, and 18th before the conference. And then the 2 days following, Monday and Tuesday, May 21st and 22nd. So make your plane reservations and your travel plans and stuff accordingly, and show up in Daytona Beach.
And the lecture also. The lecture is on Sunday.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. From novice to pro in record time.
From novice to pro in record time on Sunday. Yeah. We'll be looking forward to it.
Thanks for that reminder.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot, George. So I'm opening up the microphones. Everybody say good night to George, and thank you once again.
Okay, thank you.
Yo, George.
Thank you, George. I want to take your course.
Oh, sounds great. Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Mark says George rocks.
George rocks. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So now, ladies and gentlemen, thanks once again. I am going to mute everybody. Gosh. It didn't seem to take. That's a weird thing. I can do it this way. I can do it manually.
Okay.
I think I muted Karen. Maybe I've muted myself. Karen, can you open up your microphone? Maybe I'll do it.
I did it. I got it.
Okay. All right. So it is now that magic time. Quarter after 9. A little bit beyond that. So once again, I just need to make a couple quick announcements, and that is just to remind you that we are here at the IACT IMDHA Presenters Series. And we are interviewing the folks who will be doing pre- and post-conference presentations at the Hypno Expo, which is the weekend of May 18th, 19th, and 20th, 2018 in beautiful Daytona Beach. So do plan to be there. And these pre- and post programs that we're talking about tonight occur on days just prior to and just after that weekend. As a matter of fact, our next guest that we're going to introduce in a minute will have some of the days of his program are before and some are after as well. So again, listen, when you hear what Roy has to say, you'll know that you need to adjust your travel plans and that you've got all the dates covered so that you'll be where you need to be when you want to be there. So I do want to also just remind you all that this program is being recorded. The recording will be posted tomorrow or the next day at the latest on the IACT IMDHA forum. It will also be posted on the website for IACT and on the website for IMDHA under media. There's a tab up at the top of the page. I think it's also linked to a tab for conference as well, and it says the presenters series is there. So there's all kinds of places that you can find it. And for those of you who are members of the virtual chapter, and if you're not, feel free to join the virtual chapter on Facebook. It's just an open group. We will post replays there as well. So yet another opportunity for you to hear George again, because you know what he said was so wonderful that you're probably going to want to listen just a second time just to make sure that you heard it right. So now it is time to turn our attention to our next guest, who is Roy Hunter. And oh my gosh, Roy, I'm about to open up your microphone, but I will do that right now. Roy, I have interviewed you year after year after year for this series again and again. And the question that we're asking this time around is a little different as an opening question than what we have traditionally asked. It seems like most of the interview shows want to find out how people got involved in hypnosis. So we've already done that with you. What I'd like to hear just briefly, if you'd be willing to share with us, is how did you happen to get in the business of training after you were doing hypnosis?
I believe that's the first time you've ever asked that. And let me start by saying I really appreciate the outstanding job you do with these teleconferences for IMDHA, IACT every year. I was about 4 years into the profession, and Charles Tebbets asked me if I would teach his course in the Tacoma area, which was about 50 miles south of his school. And at the time I said, Charlie, I don't feel like I've been in the profession long enough to teach. He said, Hunter, I know a good teacher when I train one. And I said, all right, I will neither say yes nor no. Instead, let me pray on it. And I did something I normally don't do. I asked God for a sign. And in my mind, the sign was that if I went to Tacoma Community College and asked them if I could teach a full certification course, and they said yes, that would be a sign that I could teach. Right. Well, I chickened out and didn't do that. But to my total surprise, just less than a week after I said that prayer, Tacoma Community College approached me and asked me if I would consider teaching a hypnotherapy certification course. That blew my socks off, and I had my answer from a higher power, so that's when I agreed to start teaching. And then I became passionate about parts therapy because I identified with what George Bien said a little while ago about headaches, about being perfect. I was a perfectionist, and my psychodynamic was self-punishment. That part of me causing my migraines from first grade all the way through age 40 was punishing me for not being perfect. And parts therapy, one parts therapy session permanently resolved my migraine headaches. The difference has been like day and night for the past 3.5 decades. And that made a believer out of me in parts therapy, which I believe in with a passion, because for me it was a total godsend. The difference between having 2 or 3 migraines a month that would literally put me in bed for several hours or sometimes a full day, or going 3.5 decades with only 2 or 3 migraines, and all those years is like a difference of day and night. So that's what made me so passionate about parts therapy. Then Charlie, before he passed away, asked me to continue his work.
Mm-hmm. By the way,
he actually threw you in, did he not? Didn't he say you have to go do this?
He said, that he really wanted me to teach his course because, in his opinion, I was one of the best students he ever taught. That was Charlie speaking. I just felt like I was a typical average student, but then everyone was nervous about the practical exam because Joyce Tebbets was a stickler in administering the practical exam as a requirement for certification. And I kept waiting and waiting and waiting, and she never scheduled it with me. And I was down to the last class, and I said, Charlie, your wife has never scheduled my practical exam. And he called me Hunter instead of Roy. He said, Hunter, that's because I saw you working with one of your fellow students who had a confidence problem. So I told Joyce that you'd already passed the exam and there was no need to take it. What I got from that was something that I've done in all my years of teaching. When it came time for a practical exam, I would give the students the opportunity to take the practical anytime between the start of the second quarter or the conclusion of the class. So if a student did a credible critiqued session in front of his or her students, before I gave any type of evaluation, unless they totally blew it, which only happened twice in all my years of teaching, I would start out my critique by saying, congratulations, you just passed the practical exam. And they were very receptive for the critique after that, and it was very easy to get volunteers for future classes for a student to do a critique session in front of his or her classmates.
Nice. So Roy, I just want to acknowledge that I introduced you rather abruptly and got you right in there with the question, and I didn't get to say all the lovely things about you that deserve to be said. But just a personal note, I would like to point out that I have known Roy Hunter longer than I've known anybody else in these organizations, and I have known him because we were still computing in an alt hypnosis group, typing back and forth about hypnosis at a DOS prompt before we had all the lovely features that we have now. And
that goes back a few years.
Goes back
to the 90s.
And you had written during that period of time, you had written The Art of Hypnosis, and it was still available. You still had it as a Microsoft Word file. The first edition that I got of The Art of Hypnosis came from you to me by computer in a Microsoft Word document.
Wow.
that
does go back a few years.
That does go back a few years. And for people who are not familiar with Roy, I would say that The Art of Hypnosis and The Art of Hypnotherapy are in fact two classics in our field, as are all of the books, of course, that Roy is writing. But these books are known by everybody and have been around for such a respectfully for such a long time now, long enough that I could read them.
Thank you.
And what great things and contributions they are. So now Roy is the author of wrote the book about parts therapy, introducing parts therapy, and through Crown House Publishing. And so that's why we've got him here tonight to talk about parts therapy and his parts therapy training. So maybe we can just start out by getting, for people who aren't really familiar with it, your definition of what is parts therapy.
The best way to explain it is the way I do to a client in the pre-talk during a session when parts therapy is indicated. And I won't have time in the discussion tonight to talk about the various ways to know when parts therapy is indicated, but sometimes people are aware that they are having difficulty accepting hypnotic suggestions because of an inner conflict. So I say, we all wear different hats. You're seeing my hypnotherapy cap right now, but I also have an inner child hat. So when I want to have some R&R after a hard week, I put my inner child hat on, and my wife gets to see my inner romantic. There's a part of you that wants to be at your ideal weight or quit smoking or whatever the client's presenting problem is. And it's motivated you to invest your time and money for these sessions. But there's another part of you that wants to keep on overeating. Otherwise, you wouldn't need my services in the first place, would you? Right. And then if they say, I'll say, any questions? And if they have questions, I'll respond to them. Occasionally, a client will say, well, that sounds pretty weird. What do you mean we have parts? That sounds too much like DID or multiple personalities. If they say that, then I will cite the work of Gordon Emerson, who is world authority on a similar technique, ego state therapy, pioneered by a couple of psychiatrists, John and Helen Watkins, decades ago, simultaneous with when Charles Tebbets was pioneering the technique. And then I will tell them that Gordon Emerson, as a psychologist, has done some research and discovered that all of us have anywhere from 5 to 15 different parts or personality parts or ego states or aspects of the subconscious that influence our conscious behavior in any given calendar week. And he came to that conclusion over a period of years of study. The client's my employer, so if the client is now comfortable with the process, I'll initiate it. But if the client still is not comfortable with the process, then I will refer him or her to my website and tell them if they go to my website, royhunter.com, and click on hypnosis info and articles, that I have 2 articles on parts therapy posted on my website. One is for the general public and another is for hypnosis professionals, and I invite them to read both of them. And I'll do something different that particular session. And then say next session when you come back, let me know if you have any questions after you have read those articles. Because it's important that the client be comfortable with the process before I initiate parts therapy. And that applies to any and all of the variations, such as ego state therapy or voice dialogue or 6-step reframe or conference room therapy, because there are quite a number of variations of parts therapy. And I have learned from experience that if a client experiences a variation of parts therapy, whether it's parts therapy or ego state therapy, voice dialogue, without a pre-talk, there's a risk of that client erroneously believing that he or she has DID or multiple personalities. Years ago, a lady during the intake asked me, do you work with people who have multiple personalities? And I said, I will not knowingly work with a client who has multiple personalities unless I do so with supervision and collaboration with your psychotherapist or psychologist who you're working with. And this lady said, well, I'm not seeing anyone for it. And I said, well, when and where did you get diagnosed? She said, nobody's ever diagnosed me. And I said, well, what makes you think you have multiple personalities? She said, well, I was seeing a family marriage therapist for a rebellious teenager last year, and she was really good. And then I told her I wanted to have a referral to a hypnotherapist to lose some weight. And she said, oh, I'm a certified hypnotherapist, I'll help you. And I said, well, then what happened? She said, well, I went in for my first weight loss session, and next thing I know, I have all these various personalities speaking. And she said it totally freaked me out, so I stopped going to her. And she spent almost 2 years stressing over whether or not she had multiple personalities.
Wow.
So then I gave her the parts therapy pre-talk.
Yeah.
And years later, when I was teaching my 9-month, which is now a year-long full certification course in hypnotherapy for the last time, and the reason I said last time is because my wife is disabled, can't take the cold winters of Seattle, Tacoma anymore in Western Washington. So we spend 6 months of the year in the Las Vegas area. And that's where I'm talking to you from right now, as our small winter home. So in the last class, when I was in the 3rd quarter talking about parts therapy, and I talked about the example I just mentioned to you, this lady in the front row center starts crying. And I looked at her, I'll change the name, said, Marlene, what's wrong? And she said, that was me. I said, I don't remember ever seeing you as a client. She said, no, I don't mean that lady was me. She said, the same thing happened to me. And she said, I was seeing a psychotherapist for a personal problem, and she did either parts therapy or ego state therapy or voice dialogue or one of those variations, and didn't tell me what she was going to do. And she said, I was so freaked out when she brought me out of hypnosis that I don't even know whether she tried to explain it after the trance. And she said, I spent a year and a half stressing. I was afraid to go see a psychiatrist, and I was afraid not to because I didn't want to get diagnosed, but I was afraid I needed to get diagnosed. And she said, you want to know what my salvation was? And I said, what? She handed me her copy of my purple parts therapy text and said, I can't thank you enough for writing this book. She said, that eased my stress. And she said, imagine my surprise when I found out that your training center was only 4 miles from where I live. You could have been anywhere in the world. And
that's a perfect segue, Roy, into you put so many things together, the ego state and all of this, and Charles Tebbett's work and your revisions of Charles' work. Tell us a little bit about how parts therapy works. In the way
I found the best way to do it is to be like a mediator. Charlie was an arbitrator, and that's the biggest change I've made in his work over the years, because he would call out the various parts, that the part that was causing the problem and the part that wanted to overcome the problem, other parts if necessary, and then he would listen to each part present its case. Then Charlie would tell the parts what to do. He was a debate champion. I found that that approach wasn't nearly as effective for me because I'm not nearly as good at debating as Charlie. So I had several sessions go south my first year in the business. So the biggest change I made in his work was to mediate instead of arbitrate. So instead of telling the parts what to do, I listened to each part, and then I asked the right questions. And over the years, I have developed a protocol that has passed the test of time. Parts therapy isn't the only game in town, but the protocol that I have developed from what I learned from Charlie and have taught for over 3 decades now has basically helped many people overcome problems even after they've been to 2 or 3 other hypnotherapists without lasting success. And there's no technique that's so good it's going to help all of people all the time, but many times through the years, parts therapy has helped somebody resolve a problem that they only had partial or temporary resolution to elsewhere. And in some cases, one of my own clients has come back to me months later after backsliding, and I've used parts therapy where it didn't appear to be indicated in his or her first series of sessions.
Has it been picked up by mainstream healthcare now?
That's an outstanding question, and I'm going to say yes and no because there still are not enough people using it. But I also have to say yes in that in 2011, I met Bruce Eimer, who had been recommending the art of hypnosis and the art of hypnotherapy to psychologists because he's a fellow of ASCH, the people that call us lay hypnotists.
Right.
We both had an attitude problem towards the regression critics that want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So our answer to the regression critics was for the two of us to co-author The Art of Hypnotic Regression Therapy, a clinical guide. And after teaming up together, Bruce showed up at several of my parts therapy workshops, and I actually will be co-presenting parts therapy with him at Hypnothoughts Live in August. But what I'm leading towards is the fact that we became so appreciative of each other's work that we decided it was time that somebody build a bridge between hypnotherapy and psychology. So after hundreds of hours of work, because the American Psychological Association has as much red tape as the government, we got my 2-day version of parts therapy approved by the American Psychological Association for continuing education credits for licensed clinical psychologists. So that is an approval from mainstream psychology.
Right.
And I learned that although I can't advertise it publicly, the approval is granted on a provisional basis to marriage counselors, mental health counselors, because of the fact that the APA has approved it.
Nice.
And I am an approved presenter, even though I'm not a PhD psychologist.
But psychologists who come to IMDHA, IACT, or any of the places that you train can pick up CEUs for taking those trainings, can they not?
If they take the full 2-day version, they can. If I only do a 1-day version, that's not eligible. But they also have a requirement that they have to attend the full 2 days. If they come an hour late or leave an hour early, then they don't get any credit. But if they attend the full 2 days, then Bruceheimer and his organization is responsible for content and maintaining records. So Bruce and I have developed a close affiliation over the last few years. And in fact, he and I and Cindy Lasher, who's been teaching my full hypnotherapy certification course for several years in Minnesota, are creating a team approach online mentoring program. It's not launched yet. We want it to be better than good, because the online training is becoming the wave of the future. So we are taking 2 of the 4 quarters of my course and making it available online with products included, including videos, etc. But if any psychologist comes to IMDHA to take the 2-day parts therapy workshop pre-conference, he or she is eligible to receive continuing education credit, because Bruceheimer and the Behavior Therapy Center is an approved sponsor for the APA, and I'm an approved presenter. So that builds another bridge between psychology and hypnotherapy.
Sure.
And also, I'm scheduled to teach several other places throughout the year, but I'm hoping that any of you on this call who are interested in learning parts therapy will be willing to invest the time to take the training at IMDHA. If you want to come to Florida, also the hotel is in a beautiful setting. Most of the rooms have ocean views.
In fact, I might point out, for those of you who can see me on screen right now, this is Daytona Beach in back of me. So there are some hypnotherapists that that invite their clients to close their eyes and imagine themselves on a beautiful beach. It's one of the things that we don't really have to do in Florida. We could just go outside and and take a look around. Roy's class, the parts therapy that Roy is doing, is 2 days pre-conference. It's Wednesday and Thursday, the 16th and 17th, for parts therapy. And then he's also teaching a Train the Parts Therapy Trainer on the 21st and 22nd. That's the Monday and Tuesday after the weekend. So, and people can do both of those in the same year, or how does that work, Roy?
If a person has never learned parts therapy before, you're welcome to take all 4 days. I simply ask that you wait until you have some experience practicing parts therapy before you actually teach your first parts therapy workshop to other professionals. But you are able to get the full training, the full meal deal if you wish. And even though it says on the IMDHA website that basically the prerequisite for taking Train the Parts Therapy Trainer is that you take the 2-day parts therapy workshop. If you've taken my parts therapy workshop anytime in the past, then that requirement is waived, so you can invest in the last 2 days. But the IMDHA normally sends me an email asking me if you have qualified from a previous workshop.
Okay. Do you keep a list of all of those? I'm on that list if you do, because I was certified in parts therapy years ago. Do you keep that list, Roy, of everyone you've ever certified?
I did for quite a number of years, and my office got vandalized and my computer crashed. So I have many of the names. Unfortunately, I don't have all of them. And I do have all of the names of the people who've taken my Train to Parts Therapy Trainer course. And Karen, weren't you in my first Parts Therapy Train to Trainer?
I had not done Train the Trainer, Roy. I've done everything else that you've ever taught.
Oh,
But I
okay.
haven't done Train the Trainer.
I knew you were in one of my workshops. I couldn't remember.
Regression, parts therapy. I've done them all, Roy. And maybe Train the Trainer this year.
And this is the IMDHA, IACT is the only place in America where I teach the Train to Parts Therapy Trainer. And that's something that happened as a result of a conversation I had with Robert Otto several years ago because of my concern. There are so many people around the world teaching parts therapy inappropriately that I wanted to be taught properly in a client-centered manner. So the best way to ensure that it's taught properly when I'm no longer on this planet is to teach others how to teach it properly, because facilitated properly is a very effective technique that has a very high lasting long-term success rate.
Yes.
But if it's done inappropriately or improperly, if that protocol is not followed properly, a person can actually be worse off instead of better off. And I know because occasionally I've had to see clients who went somewhere else where somebody did either parts therapy or a variation or a pirated version of my parts therapy and didn't do it properly, and the person was worse off instead of better.
Yeah.
Well, and that can happen with anything in hypnotherapy. One of my favorite stories that you tell, Roy, is one about when you let a student hypnotize you once and took you down a path. Do you know yet whether you saw a UFO? Has that ever been cleared up in your mind?
I discussed that story in my parts therapy workshops, even though it's regression, because it's an example of inappropriate leading. And occasionally, when you do parts therapy, a part will regress. Therefore, I believe a person needs to also be trained in regression therapy and understand the risk of false memories and know the difference between leading and guiding. But I have not yet had a regression to find out which of the two regressions from my childhood out-of-body experience is real, because it serves me as an instructor to be able to look my peers in the eye and say, if you are on the receiving end of a mishandled regression, you won't know for sure which memories are real and which ones are false. Because the one regression where I was allegedly abducted by a UFO during my out-of-body experience or near-death experience as a 6-year-old after that scorpion sting seems just as real and just as fantasized. I mean, the only thing missing from that regression was X-Files background music.
Yeah.
And then regression number 2 a couple of years later with a lady who does believe in UFOs, but also knows how to competently handle a regression. The global light in my bedroom was a death angel there to stop me from passing over, and there wasn't any UFO present. And then the next night, a smaller global light identified itself as my guardian angel to complete the healing of my foot from the scorpion sting. Mm-hmm. Now, I could have just as easily created the false memories for regression number 2 in order to prove that regression number 1 was a bunch of false memories.
Right.
And each of those 2 regressions seems just as real as the other, but they cannot both be true.
Sure.
Perhaps there's a little bit of truth in each of them.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I can find out, but I believe, and this is a personal choice, or maybe I should say a professional choice, it makes me more credible when I'm teaching parts therapy or regression to look the people in the eye and say, if you're on the receiving end of a mishandled regression, you won't know for sure which memories are real and which ones are false. And I can say that from experience, having been on the receiving end of a blow-in regression.
Yeah. Speaking of experience, Roy, something that I want to mention, first of all, is my takeaway from tonight from talking to you, and I really appreciate your emphasis on this, is really how important the pre-talk is when it comes to framing something like parts therapy. So thanks so much for that. I noticed that our time is kind of flying by, and so I want to turn our attention for a minute to something else, and that is that we started this evening talking to George Bien, and as you know, George has taken his training all over the world to all sorts and sundry people and places, and I'm just a little curious with parts therapy as well. Where have you gone with this? You've really been training folks around the globe, have you not?
I've had the incredible privilege and honor of teaching it in over 20 countries in the 21st century. And in fact, one of the places several years ago, one of the major hospitals in Singapore, their psychiatry department, invited me to come over and teach parts therapy. And they spoke very highly of George Bien, who's been in Singapore. And I found that they were very open to the concept of parts therapy. They brought me over actually for several days because they wanted me to teach a condensed version of my basic course, followed by a 2-day parts therapy workshop for psychiatrists, psychologists, and psychotherapists who wanted to learn that additional aspect of it.
Nice. Lovely. And just curiously, as you say that, does that imply then that the sort of mainstream practitioners in Europe, at least, are a little more open to these kind of things than we've experienced in the States?
It depends on the country. Some countries are more open to it. Some countries are less open to it. Singapore is very open to it, which I appreciated greatly. So is Australia, and I've had the privilege of teaching in Iceland several times. I've taught in several countries in Europe. Last month, I taught parts therapy in Madrid, Spain, which is the first time I've been to Spain. And I've had the privilege of teaching in Portugal twice, which I particularly enjoyed because I studied Portuguese in college and never got to use the Portuguese language for over half a century. And then finally, I was able to open up my training by saying, "Bom dia, senhores e senhoras."
Nice.
And I said a couple more sentences in Portuguese, and they gave me a standing ovation, and I wasn't even 2 minutes into my talk.
Lovely.
But my Portuguese, I forgot most of it through the decades, but still,
I just got
it was
back
such
from,
a wonderful experience that they invited me back again in 2017, 3 years after my first time there.
I just got back from Brazil a couple of weeks ago, and I was at a convention there, and there were like 500 people in the room.
Wow.
Oh, it was amazing. It was the first hypnosis convention in Brazil that we're actually aware of. A fantastic group that's really getting fired up there. And they were so thrilled to see us Americans because they've been watching our YouTube videos and, and now, they had a chance for us to work with them. But everybody in the room had headsets on, fortunately. And there was an interpreter in the back of the room that was also a hypnotist and really doing a magnificent job of running this whole thing. But
I'd love to go to Brazil and teach at their next convention.
Yeah, we'll let you. We'll let you in on the scoop about it. I'll tell you about it later on. So we're getting towards the end of our time. Karen, did you have anything else, or shall we open?
I was curious from Roy, and you too, Michael. Since you do so much international training, is there a preference of client? Michael was telling me about differences of people in Portugal and how easily they just go into trance. Roy, do you have a group that you say is better at it than others, or more open to it than others?
Well, I did find the people in Portugal very open to hypnosis, and it was Dr. Alberto Lopez who had me come over there. I hope I remembered his last name correctly. And he is awesome, and apparently he has been a groundbreaker getting Portugal open to the concept of hypnotherapy. And they gave me an honorary membership in their Portuguese organization. And I found the people there to be very genuine, very sincere, very loving, and that I look forward to when I can go back.
Mhm.
Right.
I have a lot of love for the people in Portugal. They seem to be more open and more genuine than people in many countries that I've had the privilege of teaching in. And it made me feel very honored that I knew just a little bit of Portuguese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've only got about 5 minutes left, I'm afraid, 5 or 6 minutes left anyway. So I think what we want to do is make sure if anybody has any burning questions for Roy Hunter, that they get a chance to throw their hat in the ring and see if they can get them in. What we'd like you to do, participants, again, if you have opened up the participants box, at the bottom of it, there is a place where you can raise your hand, and then we'll know you have a question. We'll open your microphone. You also could open the chat box and just type in the chat window, "I have a question." That'd be great. So then we'll know that you have a question, and we can do it that way. Or if you're brave and bold, you can unmute your own microphone and just shout out, "Hey, Roy, I got something for you here." So anybody?
I see here in the chat room that Alberto Lopez, I believe that is, from Portugal.
Yes.
That must be well known.
He's very well known, and I have a lot of respect for him personally and professionally. And his significant other, she's also very awesome.
We might want to all put our heads together and go to Argentina as well. I have a friend who is a cardiologist, and he went to med school in Argentina, and they're required to study hypnosis. And they're required to use it for anesthesia, and they're required to use it for other things as part of their med school training.
In 2014, when I taught in Portugal for the first time, there was a physician that traveled all the way from Brazil to come to my workshop. And he said he would like to bring me to Brazil to teach sometime, but somehow he never followed through. Hopefully he will someday. I guess I'll have to write him back.
Nudge him a little bit.
Hypnosis is not just a career, it's a passion, it's a life path. And sometimes I feel like I eat, breathe, and sleep hypnotherapy.
Well, if I may, I don't know if you can hear me, but
Yeah.
if I may add something, and that is, you're not going to find a person more committed and more dedicated than Roy. Roy and I go back many years, and he's, besides being such a magnificent trainer and a person who has so many years of schooling, etc., and experience, he has really a heart of gold. So that's amazing. And Diego, I see your name on here. Bring him to your country.
Thank you.
All right. Well, listen.
When I got certified, I told God I wanted to help as many people as possible. Never in my wildest fantasies did I ever think that I would have the privilege and honor of helping so many people around the world. That's just been an incredible ride for me.
And at this conference in
my wife was able to go with me because I treat her like royalty when she travels with me.
Perfect. At this conference in Daytona, you will be certifying both in parts therapy and trainer, parts therapy trainer. Either or both.
Either or both.
Right.
2 days before and 2 days after the weekend, as a matter of fact. So listen, it has just been such an amazing experience to start off this series with two power players, Roy Hunter and George Bien, both on the same bill in the same evening. So as George would tell you, it was intense. And we really, really appreciated it.
Somebody just posted in the chat that they can't take the training from George and me both. So if you want to take training from both of us, take George's training at IMDHA, and then you can come take parts therapy from me either at Mid-America or Hypnothoughts Live.
There you go.
See, that's Roy. That's Roy. That's an example of his heart. He's that kind of a person. You know, another person would just fight for the client or for the student. Roy is a person, I mean, Roy and I go back so many years, and I tell you, I can't think of a person with more heart and genuineness than Roy.
Absolutely.
And knowledge
Yeah.
and experience.
So let me just remind everybody again that this has been recorded, that the you can get CEUs by going to the IACT or IMDHA website and just signing in with your member ID to claim your CEUs. You get an hour and a half for having spent time with us here this evening. The recording, as I said, will be posted tomorrow or the next day at the latest on the IACT IMDHA forum. It will be posted on the IACT and the IMDHA websites as well. Right at the top of the page, you can click on, I think it's conference. I think there's another link that's called media. It's going to be in both of those places that you can just pull the drop-down menu and find the recordings. It will also be posted on the virtual chapter group on Facebook. We are everywhere, ladies and gentlemen. And so happy to be. And now we are going to do, as we did with George, this wild.
Before we open that, if you don't mind, let me just say, because then people will go away. I just want to say 1 week from tonight, we'll have Sherry Gilbert and Bruce Eimer.
Oh, yes.
We'll bring those to you.
Thank you so much for reminding us. It's going to be a great week next week. So please be here with us. And now, if you're all ready to say goodnight to Roy, I'm going to unmute your microphones and everybody let him know how much we appreciate it. And we will sign off and we'll see you again next week. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a pleasure.
Practice long and prosper.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roy.
And
Thanks, Roy.
both of you. Thank you.
Welcome.
Obrigada, Roy.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody.
Thank you.
See you all in a couple of weeks.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. See you next week.
Okay,
Bye,
Diego.
George. Bye, Michael.
Bye.
Nice talking to you.
Thank you.